The boy was not crying anymore by the time Elias heard him. Only the rain made noise beneath the bridge, hard and silver against the broken concrete, rushing through the gutters and over the muddy slope where weeds clung to the earth like drowned hair. Elias had been trying to sleep with his back against the cold pillar, one hand pressed over the cloth bag that held everything he owned. Hunger had made his body light. Fever had made the city tilt whenever he closed his eyes. He almost dismissed the sound as a stray cat trapped inside the drainage pipe. Then the sound came again, thin enough to be swallowed by rain, but unmistakably human. For several seconds, Elias did not move. Survival had taught him that every sound in the dark came with a price. A child crying could be bait. A police whistle could mean another night spent running until his lungs tasted of rust. But the sound trembled once more, not louder, only weaker, and Elias cursed under his breath before pushing himself up. The mud accepted his shoes with a wet, greedy pull. Rain slid down the back of his neck and beneath the collar of his threadbare coat. He found the child near the mouth of the drainage tunnel, half hidden by a collapsed piece of cardboard. At first, Elias saw only a small hand curled in the mud, fingers bloodless from cold, nails packed with black dirt. The boy could not have been more than 4 or 5. His hair, soaked flat against his forehead, was dark and fine. His clothes had once been soft and tailored, making the mud on them look violent. One shoe was missing. His cheek rested against the ground as if he had simply lain down there to sleep. Except his lips were blue and his lashes kept fluttering with the stubborn rhythm of a body refusing to give up. Elias touched his neck with 2 fingers. Alive. The relief was sharp enough to hurt. "Hey," Elias said, his voice rough from disuse. "Little one, can you hear me?" The boy did not answer. Elias looked around, searching the tunnel, the slope, the underside of the bridge where shadows gathered in long seams. No adult came stumbling out. Something glittered beneath the boy's collar. Elias brushed away mud and found a broken silver pendant. Its clasp twisted as if someone had tried to tear it off. A stylized V had been engraved into the metal. It looked expensive enough to buy him food for a month. It also looked dangerous enough to get him killed. Elias let it fall back against the child's chest. "Of course," he murmured. "You couldn't be an ordinary lost child." The boy's breathing hitched. Elias hesitated only once. He had no proper address, no valid work permit, no answer that would satisfy a uniform. He was an unregistered Omega sleeping under municipal property with a child who wore a pendant worth more than his life. If he carried the boy to the police, they might save him. They might also ask why his hands were on the child, why his identification had been revoked after the scandal that destroyed him. Still, leaving him was impossible. Elias gathered the boy into his arms. The child weighed less than fear. His wet clothes clung to Elias's chest, and a faint scent rose beneath the rain milk. Fever, and something clean like winter cedar. Alpha blood. Immature, but distinct. A child with that scent did not belong in the mud. Powerful people would be searching. The kind who could turn the city over without noticing what they crushed. The boy stirred and made a broken sound. "Don't." Elias froze her. The child's eyes opened a narrow slit. They were dark, unfocused. But terror moved through them with terrible clarity. He looked past Elias, toward the tunnel, toward something only memory could see. His small hand seized Elias's coat with such force that the torn fabric strained. "Don't send me back." The words were barely there. Rain almost erased them. Elias stopped breathing. Years ago, in a carpeted office high above the city, men in tailored suits had slid forged documents across a table and told him an Omega assistant should be grateful they were not calling the police. He had looked toward the one person who promised to protect him and found only a closed door in human form. After that, he learned not to beg aloud. The boy's fist trembled against his coat. Elias covered it with his own hand, not gently enough to be sentimental, not harshly enough to frighten. "I won't," he said. "Not tonight." It was a foolish promise. He knew it the moment he spoke. He carried the child back to the driest corner beneath the bridge, where a sheet of corrugated metal leaned against concrete and trapped a pocket of stale warmth. His bedding was nothing but 2 flattened boxes and a grey blanket that smelled of rain no matter how often he wrung it out. Elias spread the blanket, then stripped off his coat to wrap around the child instead. Cold bit through his thin shirt at once. He ignored it. The boy clung even in unconsciousness. Elias checked him by touch. No obvious fractures. Scraped knees. Bruises at the upper arms. Too even to be from a fall. A cut near the hairline. Shallow but ugly. Fever burning beneath chilled skin. Elias had no thermometer. No antiseptic. And 3 coins in his pocket. "I'm going to get medicine," he told the child, though the boy could not hear him. "You need to stay quiet." The moment Elias tried to pull away, the small hand tightened. It would have been easy to break that grip. Elias had broken worse things in himself. Instead, he slid a corner of his coat into the child's fist and slipped free only when the fever dragged him deeper. It was a trick used on frightened animals. Elias hated that he knew it. He hated more that it worked. The convenience store at the end of the underpass remained open all night because desperation was profitable after midnight. Elias entered with rain dripping from his hair and mud on his trousers. The clerk looked at the 3 coins on the counter and then at Elias's empty hands. Fever tablets cost more. Bottled water cost more. The cheapest bread cost more. Elias cut loose the thin cufflink sewn inside his shirt. The last clean remnant of the life he had once been accused of stealing, and placed it beside the coins. The clerk stared. "Where did you get that?" "From a dead man," Elias said. It was not exactly a lie. When he returned with fever tablets, water, and 2 steamed buns. Someone was standing near the bridge. Elias stopped beneath the shadow of the stairwell. The figure was not police. Too still. Too well-dressed. A man in a grey raincoat stood under the road light, speaking quietly into a phone while looking toward the drainage tunnel. Another man waited near a dark sedan parked illegally at the curb, its engine still running. The city had noticed the missing child. Or the people who had lost him had. Elias stepped backwards soundlessly, then circled through the service path behind the bridge. The child was awake. He had pushed himself upright. Elias's coat wrapped around his shoulders. Eyes wide and dry. Some children sobbed after terror. This one had already learned silence. That frightened Elias more than tears would have. "Someone's looking for you," Elias said quietly. The boy stared at him. "Do you know your name?" For a moment, the child seemed to retreat into the blankness behind his eyes. Then his lips parted. No sound came. Elias opened the water and held it out, letting him take it himself. The small hands shook so violently that water spilled over his fingers. Elias did not help until the bottle nearly fell. Pride, even in children, could be the last thin wall around a broken place. "Noah," the boy whispered at last. Elias glanced at the pendant. The letters beneath the mud might have been N.V. Noah Vale. Perhaps. He did not like how the name settled in the air. Neat and expensive. "I'm Elias," he said. "You have a fever. You need medicine." Noah looked at the packet. Then at him. Suspicion flickered there. Far older than his face. Elias swallowed 1 tablet dry, grimacing as bitterness spread over his tongue. then handed the next to Noah. See, not poison. The boy watched him for another heartbeat before obeying. Elias broke the steamed bun in half and gave the larger piece away before he could think better of it. Noah ate slowly at first, then with sudden, desperate speed that made Elias look away. Outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. Noah flinched so violently the bun fell into his lap. Elias moved before choosing to. He shifted between the boy and the open side of the shelter. Body angled, head lowered, every part of him listening. The men near the road had not come down yet. Perhaps they had moved on. Perhaps they were waiting. Elias had been hunted before. Waiting was often more dangerous than pursuit. Noah's fingers crept into the back of Elias's shirt. "You said," Noah whispered. "You said not tonight." Elias closed his eyes briefly. Above them, people were driving home to warm rooms. Somewhere. The person who put Noah in the mud might be waiting to see whether the river finished what they began. Elias should have left the child near a hospital entrance. Anonymously. Safely. Cleanly. That would be the intelligent choice. That would let him return to being invisible. Instead, he reached back and covered Noah's hand. "I remember," Elias said. The boy leaned against him. Not with trust yet, but with exhaustion mistaken for it. Elias allowed the wait. For one night, beneath a bridge the city pretended not to see. An abandoned Omega and a missing Alpha heir shared a coat. A stale blanket, and the kind of silence that did not ask for explanations. Near dawn, the rain stopped. Mist lifted from the ground in pale strips. Elias had not slept. Noah's fever had eased, but he still murmured whenever shadows moved. The pendant lay exposed against his chest now, clean enough for Elias to read the engraving clearly, Ve'ele. Beneath it, in smaller letters, were words that made Elias's throat tighten despite himself. Property of no one, protected by blood. A low engine rolled to a stop beyond the bridge. This time, the car did not remain on the road. It came down the maintenance path slowly, black paint reflecting the weak dawn. Two men stepped out first, both in dark suits, both scanning the bridge with disciplined eyes. Then the rear door opened. The man who emerged did not hurry. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a black coat that turned the grey morning colder around him. Rainwater still clung to the ends of his hair, and his face held the kind of calm that did not mean peace. It meant control sharpened until it could cut, even from the shadows. Elias felt the pressure of him, Alpha, mature and powerful, his presence moving through the air with the quiet violence of a locked door. The man held a photograph in one gloved hand. Noah made no sound, but his body went rigid against Elias's side. The Alpha looked beneath the bridge. His gaze found the child first, then Elias. For one suspended moment, the three of them remained perfectly still, the heir who had been thrown away, the Omega who had picked him up, and the man who looked as if he owned every road that could lead out. The Alpha's voice crossed the wet concrete, low and terrifyingly even. "Step away from the boy. Step away from the boy." The command did not rise above the morning mist. Yet every sound beneath the bridge seemed to retreat from it. Elias felt Noah's fingers hook into the back of his shirt. The child did not cry. His fear had already passed beyond crying into that terrible, obedient silence children learned when noise had once made things worse. Elias did not move. One of the suited men shifted forward. Elias saw the shape of a weapon beneath his coat and angled his body more completely in front of Noah. Mud dried along Elias's sleeves. His hair clung to his jaw. A stolen-looking child hid behind him in a coat too large for his shoulders. There was no version of this scene in which Elias looked innocent. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. I said, "Step away. He has a fever." Elias replied, "If your men rush him, he'll panic." A faint change passed across the man's face, too controlled to be called surprise. His gaze dropped to Noah, to the pendant against the boy's chest, then to the bruising around his arms. Something lethal and soundless entered the air. Elias understood that the man's calm was not the absence of violence, but the discipline restraining it. "Noah," the Alpha said. The child shuddered, as if the name had touched a wound. He peered around Elias's side. Recognition flickered there, tangled with terror and exhaustion. The Alpha took half a step forward, and Noah instantly buried his face against Elias's shirt. "Noah, come here." Noah shook his head. It was a small movement. It destroyed something in the man's expression. Elias did not know who this Alpha was to the child. Father, uncle, owner, savior, threat. The wealthy had many names for possession, but he knew the body language of a frightened child. Noah was not refusing because he did not recognize the man. He was refusing because recognition had become complicated. "He needs a doctor," Elias said. The Alpha looked at him again. His features were severe black hair pushed back from a pale forehead, sharp brows, a mouth held too firmly. "And you are someone who found him before the river did." "That isn't an answer. It's the only one that matters right now." The man beside the car took a step forward. "Mr. Vale." The Alpha lifted one hand. Silence returned at once. "Vale." Elias felt the name travel through him like cold water. Its towers cut the skyline. Its subsidiaries owned enough hospitals, homes, and debts to decide who survived comfortably and who disappeared quietly. Elias had once worked for one of those subsidiaries before a forged leak report turned him into a convenient stain to erase. He should have guessed from the pendant. He should have left the child at a hospital and vanished before dawn. Adrian Vale studied him as if he could hear the thought. "You know my name. Most people do. And yet you kept him here. Would you have preferred I leave him in the mud?" Irritation broke through Adrian's control. It vanished almost immediately. But Elias saw it. So did Noah. The child pressed closer, and Adrian's gaze dropped to that small hand twisted into Elias's shirt. A muscle moved once in his jaw. The doctor arrived in another black car, older than the guards and too experienced to ask questions at the wrong moment. He crouched where Elias allowed him to, hands visible, voice low. Noah refused to be touched until Elias demonstrated every step on himself: wrist, forehead, pulse, light against the eyes. Only then did the child submit. Trembling so hard Elias could feel it through the blanket. Fever, dehydration, mild concussion possible, the doctor said. Bruising on both arms, lacerations. He needs a proper examination. Adrian's eyes darkened. Can he be moved? Yes, carefully. He should be kept warm. At that, Adrian removed his own coat. The heavy black coat settled over Noah, by necessity, over Elias's arms as well. It carried warmth and the restrained scent of cedar smoke after rain. Noah did not reject it. He looked at the fabric, then toward Adrian, uncertainty trembling across his mouth. The ride to the Vale residence felt less like rescue than transport under arrest. Elias sat in the back with Noah in his lap because the boy would not release him. A guard sat opposite. Adrian rode beside them, separated by inches and a silence wide enough to become another wall. Outside the tinted windows, flooded alleys gave way to guarded avenues, where trees grew in straight, expensive lines. Noah slept before they reached the gates. Only then did Adrian speak. How long was he with you? Since last night. You didn't report him. I considered it. and decided against it. Elias looked down at Noah's flushed face. He said not to send him back. Something in the car tightened. The guard's eyes flickered toward Adrian before dropping again. Adrian's hand, resting on his knee, curled once and relaxed. Back where Adrian asked, "I was hoping you knew." Adrian turned toward the window. Dawn had thinned into a bleak morning. He did not defend himself. That troubled Elias more than anger would have. The Vale residence was a decision made in stone. All iron gates, wet marble, and windows that reflected the sky without letting it enter. Staff gathered in the entrance hall as Noah was carried inside by Elias, because any attempt to transfer him made the child jerk awake in panic. Their eyes moved over Elias's muddy shoes. Torn cuffs, hollow cheeks. Adrian noticed. "Clear the hall," he said. No one questioned him twice. A medical room had been prepared before they arrived. Elias stopped at the threshold, suddenly conscious that he was about to smear mud across a room cleaner than any place he had touched in months. Adrian looked back. "Bring him in." The doctor worked quickly. Noah woke once when a nurse tried to remove Elias's coat from his hand and began to thrash with silent terror. Elias caught his wrists, not restraining so much as anchoring. "Noah, look at me." Elias waited until the child's eyes found his. "No one is taking me away yet. Breathe." Yet. Adrian heard the word. He stood near the wall with his hands behind his back, watching as a homeless Omega did what a mansion full of trained adults could not. There was no gratitude in his face, but his attention had changed. Suspicion remained. Beside it, something quieter began to form. When Noah finally slept under medication, Elias attempted to withdraw his hand. The boy's fingers tightened weakly around two of his. The doctor lowered his voice. "It may be best if he stays close for now." Adrian did not answer immediately. Every person in the room seemed to understand that the suggestion had crossed a line. An unknown Omega, filthy from the street. Remaining beside the missing heir of Vale Group was not a medical plan. It was a scandal waiting for breath. At last Adrian said, "Everyone out except Dr. Mercer." The room emptied. Elias stayed because Noah's hand held him there. Adrian approached the bed slowly, stopping on the opposite side. The distance between them was only the width of a mattress. Yet it held suspicion. Class, blood, and a child's sleeping body. "You understand how this appears?" Adrian said. "Yes. You were found hiding under a bridge with the missing heir of my family. I found him under a bridge. There's a difference." "Not to investigators." Elias looked at him over Noah's face. "Then investigate." Adrian's gaze sharpened. Most people flinched when he looked at them that way. Elias did not because exhaustion had stripped him too close to bone. Fear required strength. He had used most of his carrying Noah through the rain. Dr. Mercer cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Val." The boy's stress response is severe. Forcing separation today could worsen his condition. Adrian's mouth tightened. "How long?" "At least until he stabilizes." "And the Omega?" The phrasing landed like an object placed between them. Not man. Not Elias. The Omega. Elias told himself it did not matter. People with power simplified others when complexity became inconvenient. Dr. Mercer glanced at Elias's split knuckles, fever-bright skin, and the careful way he kept weight off one injured ankle. "He also needs treatment." "I'm fine." Elias said. Adrian ordered food, clean clothes, and a guest room with the same tone he might use to order a security sweep. Elias accepted none of it gracefully. In the adjoining washroom, he stood under hot water so sudden and luxurious it felt like punishment. Mud spiraled down the drain. Beneath it emerged bruises he had stopped counting and old scars pale against his sides. When he returned, dressed in borrowed clothes that fit well enough to be unsettling, Noah was awake and crying without sound. Elias crossed the room before remembering Adrian was there. Noah reached for him with both arms. Elias sat on the edge of the bed, and the child collapsed against him. Shaking, Adrian stood by the window, one hand half raised and then lowered. No one else would have noticed the aborted gesture. Elias did. He woke and couldn't see you. Adrian said, "There was no accusation in it." That made Elias uneasy. "He'll calm down." "Can you make him eat?" "I can try." Adrian watched as Elias coaxed Noah through 3 spoonfuls of porridge, then half a cup of water. It was slow, quiet work, built from pauses and patience. Noah refused the nurse, ignored Adrian, but followed Elias's murmured instructions as though each one were a plank laid across deep water. By afternoon, the rain returned against the tall windows. Adrian asked Elias to step into the corridor. Noah protested at once. Elias placed the torn piece of his old coat in the child's hand. The same trick from beneath the bridge. Noah clutched it and watched the door as if distance itself could betray him. In the corridor. Adrian handed Elias an envelope. Elias did not take it. "Compensation," Adrian said. "For what you did, there will be more once your statement is taken." "Statement. You'll tell my people exactly where you found him and what happened. After that, arrangements can be made for you to leave discreetly." There it was. Not cruelty. Something cleaner and colder. The world correcting an irregularity. Elias looked at the envelope. How much is the price of not being seen? Adrian's expression did not change. But the air did. "You misunderstand." "No," Elias said softly. "I usually understand too quickly." Before Adrian could reply, a small crash sounded inside the room. Noah's hoarse voice followed. "Broken open, at last." "No." Inside. Noah had knocked over the water cup, trying to climb down from the bed. His face was white with panic. The scrap of coat clenched to his chest. "Don't make him go," Noah cried. Elias stopped so abruptly Adrian nearly brushed his shoulder. Noah looked past everyone and fixed on Elias with the terrible certainty of a child who had lost too much to politeness. Tears finally spilled down his face. "He's home." The room fell silent. Elias felt the word strike him somewhere no accusation had reached. Home. He owned no door. No bed. No name anyone had not already dragged through dirt. Yet this child, heir to a kingdom of glass and steel, looked at him as if safety had a human shape, and that shape was his. Adrian stood very still. For the first time since dawn, his control seemed insufficient. He looked at Noah, then at Elias. And something changed, not softened, not yielded, but altered under pressure. He turned to the guard at the door. "Prepare a room for him," Adrian said. Elias's throat tightened. "Mr. Vale." Adrian did not look away from Noah. "Not near the servants' wing," he added, "next to Noah's." The room prepared for Elias had no lock on the inside. He noticed that before he noticed the size of the bed, the clean curtains, or the bowl of pale lilies placed on the low table by someone who thought all Omegas liked delicate things. The door closed softly behind the maid, leaving him alone beneath a ceiling too high for sleep. Rain tapped against the window with patient fingers. Across the corridor, Noah's room remained lit. The door opened because every time it shut, the child's fevered breathing turned sharp. A room next to the heirs was not kindness. It was surveillance, dressed as consideration. Elias understood the language of wealthy houses quickly, which doors opened without sound. which servants looked directly at him and which looked through him, which corners held cameras disguised as shadows. Vale residence did not imprison people with chains. It used marble, procedure, and the assumption that no one poor enough to enter could leave without permission. Near midnight, Noah cried out. Elias crossed the corridor before the guard could react. The nurse inside had frozen with a cup of medicine in one hand, her professional calm fraying under the child's panic. Noah sat upright in bed, eyes unfocused. The scrap of Elias's old coat crushed to his mouth. He was not calling for his uncle. His small body searched the room until Elias stepped into the light. "I'm here," Elias said. Noah's breath caught, then broke into trembling relief. Elias sat beside him and took the medicine from the nurse without asking permission. He dipped the spoon, blew once over the surface, and waited until Noah's gaze found his. Only then did the boy swallow. From the doorway, Adrian watched the exchange in silence, one hand resting against the frame as if he had arrived in haste and stopped himself from entering. "You were sleeping?" Adrian asked. "No." That wasn't my question. It was my answer. For a moment, the rain filled the room between them. Adrian's expression remained unreadable, but something in his eyes shifted. Perhaps the smallest recognition that Elias's refusals were rarely careless. Noah leaned against Elias's side, exhausted by fear. The fever had left his skin damp and his lashes dark against his cheeks. He used to sleep alone, Adrian said quietly. Then something taught him not to. Adrian's jaw tightened. Elias regretted the words almost as soon as he spoke them, not because they were untrue, but because truth had a way of making powerful men dangerous. Yet Adrian did not punish him for it. He only looked at Noah for a long time. And in that looking, Elias glimpsed a fracture beneath the polished authority gilt, deep and old enough to have roots. By morning, the mansion had adjusted to Elias's existence the way a body adjusted to a splinter. Breakfast arrived on a tray placed outside his room, separate from the household dining schedule. Elias ate half, because refusing food was a luxury reserved for people whose next meal was guaranteed. Afterward, he returned the tray himself and followed the sound of voices toward the medical room. 2 maids fell silent when he passed. "He doesn't look like a kidnapper," one whispered after he turned the corner. "That's why they use omegas," the other murmured. "Soft face, soft voice, easy to trust." Elias kept walking. Words did not bruise as badly when one expected them. The trick was not to touch the place they landed. He had learned this in offices where alphas discussed his future over his head, in shelters where other omegas hid bread beneath pillows, in alleys where pity became another kind of currency. He entered Noah's room with his expression calm enough that the child did not notice the stain the morning had left. Noah was sitting by the window with Dr. Mercer. A picture book lay unopened on his lap. Adrian stood nearby, reading from a tablet while pretending not to observe every breath the child took. Men like Adrian Vale did not know how to hover, so they disguised concern as oversight. "Did you eat?" Noah asked. The question startled the room. Elias looked at the child, then at the untouched bowl beside him. "Only if you did." Noah considered this bargain seriously. Then he picked up his spoon. Dr. Mercer's brows lifted. Adrian's gaze moved from Noah to Elias, with the sharpness of a man watching a locked mechanism open in someone else's hand. It would have been satisfying if Elias did not understand the danger of being useful. Useful people were kept until they became inconvenient. After the meal, Adrian asked Elias to join him in the study. It was less a request than a rearrangement of space. Elias followed Adrian down a corridor lined with portraits of alphas who had inherited money and mistaken it for virtue. The study overlooked the rain-dark garden. Shelves rose to the ceiling, A thin folder waited on the desk. Adrian opened it. Elias Wen, 26. Former administrative assistant at Northline Biomed. A Vale subsidiary. Employment terminated 3 years ago after an internal investigation involving leaked procurement documents and unauthorized financial access. Elias did not sit. You found that quickly. I find most things quickly. Then you also found I was never charged. Lack of charges does not prove innocence. No. Elias said, it usually proves someone powerful preferred not to have evidence examined in court. Adrian closed the folder. His attention was not only suspicious now, it was precise. You speak as if you understand corporate investigations. I filed enough minutes for them. You were an assistant. I was underestimated. Those aren't the same. A faint silence followed. Not empty, but measuring. Adrian had expected fear. Perhaps gratitude. Perhaps defensiveness. Elias offered none cleanly. He stood in borrowed clothes with exhaustion under his eyes and spoke about forged ruin as if discussing weather. To Adrian, who had spent years surrounded by people eager to bend. That steadiness was either innocence or a more dangerous kind of control. What do you want? Adrian asked. Elias almost laughed. Everyone wanted something here, shares. Silence. Signatures. Bloodlines. For Noah to recover. For whoever left him under that bridge to be found. After that, to leave without being dragged into your family's war. Adrian's eyes remained on him. You think this is a family war? I think children with pendants like his aren't abandoned by strangers. The answer struck closer than Elias intended. Adrian turned toward the window, where rain blurred the garden into grey. His elder brother's funeral had been 6 months ago. The official cause wrapped in language clean enough for public grief. Since Noah vanished, every condolence had begun to sound like calculation. Behind them, the door opened without a knock. Marian Vale entered as if the house had been waiting for her permission to breathe. She was in her late 50s, elegant in a cream suit. Her hair pinned with silver restraint. Her presence carried the practiced warmth of someone who had spent decades making knives look like heirlooms. Adrian, she said, you did not tell me our guest was already being received in the study. Because I wasn't receiving him. Her smile touched Elias without landing. Of course, Mr. Ven. Is it we are grateful for your assistance. Truly, the family has endured enough unpleasant attention. Elias lowered his eyes by exactly the amount politeness required. Madam, a well-mannered one, Marian said, turning the words into something almost kind. That will help. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Help what? With discretion. Marian looked at the folder. Then at Elias's borrowed cuffs. The child is fragile. The press is circling. If rumors spread that Noah was found clinging to an unknown homeless Omega, people will ask unfortunate questions. It would be better for everyone if Mr. Wen understood the temporary nature of his role. There was no open insult. That was the skill of it. Marian made removal sound like hygiene. Elias felt Adrian look at him. Perhaps expecting anger. He gave none. I understand temporary roles very well. Something flickered in Marian's eyes. Quickly gone. Then we will get along. They did not get along. By evening, Marian had arranged a family dinner to restore normalcy. Though normalcy in the Vale house apparently required 13 dishes, 6 relatives, and a child too frightened to sit unless Elias stood behind his chair. Adrian allowed it after one glance at Noah's white knuckles. The relatives allowed it less gracefully. Conversation moved around Elias as though he were furniture brought in wet from outside. Noah ate 2 bites of fish only after Elias checked the bones. Adrian said little. Marian guided the table with soft hands, grief for Noah, concern for Adrian, admiration for the police, and finally a pause shaped perfectly for cruelty. "Mr. Venn," she said, "you must forgive our curiosity. Before last night, where exactly were you living?" The table quieted. Elias wiped Noah's spoon with a napkin, under South Meridian Bridge. A younger cousin made a small sound into his wineglass. Someone else looked away, embarrassed on behalf of the carpet. Marian's expression folded into sympathy. "How difficult. It is fortunate you encountered Noah before someone with less honest intentions did." The implication sat on the table like a blade with a velvet handle. Noah's hand found Elias's sleeve beneath the table. Elias placed the spoon down and looked at Marian. "Yes, very fortunate." A servant approached then, perhaps nervous, perhaps instructed. He placed a small side plate near Elias on the console behind Noah rather than at the table. On it was a dry roll and a shallow bowl of soup already cooling. "For the guest," he murmured. The words were quiet. The room heard them anyway. Elias stared at the plate. His face did not change. That was his one remaining vanity. No one would see hunger flinch in him. He reached for the bowl because wasting food still felt like sin. Before his fingers touched it, Adrian spoke. "Take it away." The servant froze. Adrian did not raise his voice. "And leave the house before midnight. Your final pay will be doubled. Since someone clearly taught you to mistake humiliation for service." Color drained from the servant's face. Marian's smile disappeared for half a second. Elias kept his hand suspended over the empty place where the bowl had been. He did not thank Adrian. Gratitude would have made the moment smaller than it was, and more dangerous than it needed to be. Dinner ended soon after. That night, Elias found a covered tray outside his bedroom door. The food was warm rice, clear broth, steamed egg, greens cut small enough for someone tired to eat without effort. No note, no apology, nothing that could be returned. Across the corridor, Adrian stood half in shadow outside Noah's room, speaking softly with Dr. Mercer. He did not look toward Elias. That was how Elias knew. He carried the tray inside and sat by the window. For several minutes, he only watched steam rise and disappear. Silent protection was still protection. It was also a chain if one mistook it too quickly for care. Later, after Noah fell asleep, Elias cleaned the broken pendant with water and the edge of a towel. The engraved veil emerged first, then another mark. Almost hidden along the inner rim, a corporate seal shaped like an angular wing. His hand went cold. 3 years ago, that same seal had appeared at the bottom of a file. He was accused of leaking a procurement file from Northline Biomed. Stamped confidential and used to end his life. Before he understood, he had been placed inside someone else's design. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Elias held the pendant until its edge cut into his palm and finally understood that Noah had not simply fallen into his life. He had been returned to the scene of the lie. The study drawer should have been locked. Elias knew that before his fingers found the brass handle beneath Adrian Vale's desk. The mansion was too careful a machine to leave its heart unsecured by accident. Yet the drawer slid open with a soft wooden sigh, revealing files arranged with the arrogance of people who believed order could make guilt respectable. Elias stood barefoot on the dark rug, Noah's broken pendant clenched in his palm, listening to rain drag its nails down the window. He had not come to steal. That distinction mattered only to him. The folder he needed carried the old Northline seal, the angular wing stamped in blue ink at the bottom corner. His name appeared on the 5th page, printed in a narrow column beside words that had ruined him with administrative neatness. Unauthorized access. Probable collusion. Internal disciplinary recommendation. Beneath the language. Someone had built a coffin and called it procedure. The door opened behind him. Elias closed the folder slowly, not because he was calm, but because sudden movement would make him look guilty in a room designed to believe that about him already. Adrian stood at the threshold in a black shirt with the sleeves unfastened, as if he had come down from a sleepless night rather than a scheduled confrontation. His eyes moved from Elias's hand to the open drawer, then to the file on the desk. He did not call for guards. That restraint was worse than alarm. You move quietly. Adrian said, "So do you. This is my study. And this is my life on your desk." For a moment, neither man spoke. The lamp threw a low amber circle over the papers, leaving the corners of the room in blue shadow. Elias felt the pendant cutting into his palm. If he opened his hand, Adrian would see the mark. If he kept holding it, blood would come sooner or later. He wondered which counted as confession in the world of alphas. Adrian stepped inside and closed the door. "Explain." "No." The answer landed too quickly. Adrian's gaze sharpened. But Elias saw something beneath the suspicion, impatience born not from authority, but from fear. Noah had brought them both to the edge of something neither could name. Any hidden movement near the child now looked like a blade. "You entered my study after midnight." Adrian said, "You searched restricted files connected to the company that dismissed you. You are holding something you don't want me to see. Do you understand how little room you are leaving me to trust you?" Elias looked at the folder, then at him. "Trust is generous language for surveillance. I let you stay beside Noah because he screamed when I left, because he needed you." The correction was quiet. Elias did not expect it, which made it more dangerous than anger. His grip tightened around the pendant until pain steadied him. He wanted to believe there was a difference between being used and being needed. Poverty taught one to distrust differences too fine to eat. Adrian came closer, stopping on the opposite side of the desk. "What did you find?" "Something old." "That is not an answer. You prefer answers after your lawyers clean them first." Adrian's expression cooled. "Be careful." Elias almost smiled. "That was the first skill I learned here." The words struck the room with a force neither expected. Here did not mean the study, or even the mansion. It meant the Veil network, its subsidiaries, its elegant documents, its habit of turning people into errors. Adrian's face changed by a fraction, and Elias understood that he had not known. Before Adrian could speak, a sound came from the corridor. It was not a scream, it was worse, a small, strangled breath cut short. Both men turned at once. Elias was moving before thought returned. He pulled the study door open and saw Noah at the far end of the hallway in his sleep clothes. One hand on the wall, eyes wide but seeing nothing in front of him. The child's lips moved around a word that would not come. Adrian took one step. Noah flinched back so violently his shoulder hit the wall. Elias stopped Adrian with a lifted hand. The gesture was absurd. No one in that house stopped Adrian Vale with a hand. Adrian stopped anyway. "Noah," Elias said softly, "I'm here." The child's gaze searched, frantic and unmoored. "It's dark," he whispered. The car was dark. Elias lowered himself to one knee, keeping distance between them. "You're in the hallway. The lights are on. Listen to the rain." Noah shook his head. His breathing quickened until each inhale rasped. Adrian stood frozen 3 paces behind Elias. Every instinct in him clearly demanding movement, and every lesson Elias had given him demanding stillness. It was the first time Elias saw the man fight himself so visibly. "Noah," Adrian said, softer than Elias had ever heard him, "I'm not sending you anywhere." The child's face crumpled, but he did not move toward him. He reached blindly. not choosing between them, only drowning. Elias took his left hand. After a long second, Adrian knelt and offered his right, without touching first. Noah stared at it. His small fingers hovered, trembled, then closed around Adrian's thumb. The three of them remained there under the hallway lights while the mansion slept around them. An omega with blood in his palm. An alpha who had never learned how to ask for forgiveness. And a child holding both as if the world might split if either let go. No one said the word family. It would have broken the moment by naming what was still too fragile to survive language. Adrian carried Noah back only after Elias nodded permission. That, too, became part of the strange new order of things. In Noah's room, the curtains were left open to the rain-lit garden. Elias sat on one side of the bed and Adrian on the other. Noah lay between them, awake and exhausted, his fingers still tangled in both of their sleeves. Every time Adrian tried to pull away, Noah stirred. Every time Elias shifted, the child's eyes opened. Dawn crept into the room by inches and found them unchanged. Adrian looked across the bed. "You're bleeding." Elias opened his hand. The pendant lay there, its edge red, for once. He had no graceful way to hide. Adrian's gaze dropped to the metal. Recognition passed through him at once. Cold and controlled. "Where did you get that?" "Noah had it when I found him." "You kept it." "I cleaned it." "You hid it." "I recognized the seal." The truth left him before caution could stop it. Adrian's eyes returned to his face. Elias felt the old fear rise. Not of violence, but of being measured and discarded by someone who could afford certainty. "That seal was on my case file," Elias said. "Not the official dismissal papers. The internal procurement file I was accused of leaking. I saw it once before they revoked my access. Then everyone insisted I had imagined details because Omegas under pressure become confused." Adrian reached for the pendant, then stopped before touching Elias's palm. The pause was small. Elias noticed it anyway. Adrian was learning permission from a child and a man he did not trust. "May I?" "Elias, let him take it." Adrian turned the pendant under the lamp beside the bed. "This was commissioned for Noah by my brother. Only 3 people had access before it was given to him. Your brother, you, and my aunt." The rain seemed to grow louder. Noah had fallen asleep at last. One fist closed around Adrian's sleeve. Adrian did not look at Elias when he spoke again. "Marion handled several internal restructuring matters after my brother became ill. Northline was among them." The name entered the room like a door opening onto cold air. Elias remembered Marion's cream suit, her polished sympathy, the way she had said temporary nature with a smile gentle enough to pass in public. He had known she was dangerous. He had not known she might have reached into his life long before they met. "Then you understand why I didn't tell you," Elias said. Adrian's hand closed around the pendant. "I understand why you thought I would protect my family first." Elias waited for denial. None came. "That is not comforting," he said. "No." Adrian replied, "It is honest." Honesty should not have felt like an offering. Elias hated that some part of him accepted it. The room held the pale intimacy of sleeplessness. When people said things daylight would later punish, Adrian looked less like the city's untouchable CEO and more like a man sitting beside the wreckage of every assumption he had made. "I need access to Northline's archived records," Elias said. "Not the cleaned files. The originals. You think Noah's kidnapping and your case are connected. I think the person who framed me used the same hand to mark him. And if you are wrong, then I am still ruined. And he is still traumatized. Wrong would be familiar." Adrian looked at Noah. His expression did not soften, it deepened, becoming harder to read because it was no longer only anger. I'll have the archives reviewed. No. His eyes lifted. Elias forced himself not to look away. If you send your people, the records will disappear before they reach the second drawer. Whoever did this knows how your house breathes. Adrian absorbed that in silence. Men like him built their lives around the belief that control could be widened until nothing escaped it. Yet Noah's hand around his sleeve was proof that something had already escaped with blood on it. "What are you asking for?" Adrian said. "Time. Access. And for you not to decide I'm guilty just because the evidence arrives wrapped properly." It was too much. Elias knew that. Still, he asked because a child had slept between them, because a pendant had cut his palm open, because Adrian had stopped when Noah feared him. Small mercies were not trust, but they could become the first stones across water. Adrian returned the pendant to Elias's bandaged hand hours later, after sending for antiseptic himself instead of a nurse. "You'll have limited access under my supervision." That sounds like a polite prison. It is a compromise. I've had bad experiences with those. So have I, Adrian said. The quiet answer stayed with Elias longer than it should have. By afternoon, Noah's fever had broken. He sat in the garden room with a blanket around his shoulders, while Elias read from a picture book he was too old to enjoy but too tired to refuse. Adrian worked at the far table, answering messages in silence. To anyone passing the glass doors, they might have appeared oddly peaceful. Marian watched them from the upper landing. She did not enter. She had never needed to interrupt a room to change its temperature. Her gaze rested first on Noah, then on Adrian, and finally on Elias, who sat in borrowed clothes beneath winter light as if the house had begun making space around him. Beside her, a man from the legal department waited with a folder tucked under one arm. Marian's voice was low. The Omega's old file. Everything. The man hesitated. "Mr. Vale has restricted access." A smile returned to her face, faint and forgiving. "Then, use the copies prepared 3 years ago. Add the recent transfers. The bridge footage as well, once it has been adjusted." "Madame, if Mr. Vale discovers, he will discover what we give him to discover." Below, Noah laughed softly at something Elias had read wrong on purpose. Adrian looked up from his tablet, and for a fleeting second, the severity left his face. Marian watched that. "2. By tomorrow," she said, turning away. Make him look like the kind of person a grieving uncle would hate himself for trusting. The envelope arrived before breakfast, sealed in white wax and placed exactly at the center of Adrian Vale's desk. No sender's name, no courier record, no careless fingerprint. Whoever sent it understood his house well enough to pass through security without appearing suspicious. Adrian stood beside the desk, listening to the faint sounds beyond the study door, rainwater dripping from the eaves, porcelain in the dining room. Noah's soft voice reciting a word Elias had taught him the night before. For the first time in years, Adrian wished a document would not open. Inside were photographs. The first showed Elias beneath South Meridian Bridge 3 nights before Noah was found, his face half turned beneath a broken street lamp. The second showed a hooded man handing him a black bag. The third showed Elias withdrawing cash from an account Adrian did not recognize. Beneath them lay transfer records, message logs, a partial location trail, and an anonymous note typed without emotion. The Omega you trusted did not find the heir by accident. Adrian read everything once. Then again, his face remained still. But the room changed around him. Paper had always been clean in his world. Signatures, reports, court filings, acquisition plans, violence refined into order. He had built an empire by believing evidence more than pleading. Now the evidence sat beneath his hand. precise and poisonous. Every line pointing toward the man, currently teaching Noah how to hold a pencil without pressing too hard. He should have called security. Instead, he called Elias. The Omega arrived 10 minutes later in a plain grey sweater, sleeves pulled over the bandage on his palm. He paused at the threshold, looked once at Adrian's face, then at the documents. Something in him closed before a word was spoken. Adrian hated that he noticed. He hated more that he understood the motion, not guilt. Not surprise, but a body preparing to be struck where it had been struck before. "Did you know this was coming?" Adrian asked. Elias walked to the desk. He did not touch the photographs. His eyes moved over them with a stillness so complete it resembled indifference. But Adrian saw the blood leave his lips. "No," Elias said, "but I know the handwriting." "There is no handwriting." "That's what I mean." The answer should have angered him. It did. Yet beneath the anger was something worse, fear wearing the mask of duty. Noah's hand closing around Elias's sleeve. Noah saying home. Adrian could command a boardroom into silence, but he could not command a child's trust into a shape convenient for investigation. These messages were sent from a device linked to you. Adrian said, "The account received 3 transfers over 6 months. The last one was withdrawn 2 days before Noah disappeared. I have never seen that account. The footage places you near the bridge before the police search area expanded. I lived under that bridge." "And the man with the bag?" Elias looked up. "You want me to invent an answer quickly? Or would you prefer the truth slowly?" Adrian's hand tightened over the edge of the desk. "I want you to understand that Noah's life is not a place for cleverness." At that, Elias flinched. It was slight, but it cut through the room more sharply than denial. Elias had endured Marion's politeness, servants' contempt, medical inspection, and the indignities of borrowed clothes without letting pain show. This reached him. Not accusation alone, the implication that his care for Noah might have been performance. "You think I don't know that?" Elias asked. His voice remained low. That made it worse. Adrian looked away first. It was a failure of courage disguised as consideration. "I think I do not know what to believe." Silence settled heavily. Elias glanced toward the window, where the garden lay washed in pale rain. When he spoke again, the anger had vanished, leaving something Adrian had no defense against. 3 years ago, someone placed documents like these in front of men with your name on their paychecks. They said the facts were regrettable. They said cooperation would make things easier. Not one person asked why the evidence fit too perfectly around a man with nothing worth stealing. I am asking now. "No," Elias said. "You are hesitating now." The sentence landed with brutal accuracy. Adrian had no answer clean enough to survive it. A knock came before either man could move. The door opened a fraction. "And Dr." Mercer's voice entered carefully. "Mr. Vale, Noah is asking for both of you. He refuses breakfast." Elias turned at once. Adrian said his name, too quietly for command and too late for trust. Elias stopped, but did not face him. "I need time," Adrian said. Elias looked back then. His expression was calm in the way winter rivers were calm when deep enough to kill. That's what powerful people call doubt when they can afford to wait. He left the study before Adrian could decide whether to follow. Noah was in the garden room, sitting cross-legged on the rug, with a breakfast tray untouched beside him. He brightened when Elias entered, then looked past him for Adrian. Children noticed absences before adults admitted them. "Uncle is busy," Noah asked. "For a little while." "Did you fight?" Elias knelt beside him, reaching for the pencil they had abandoned yesterday. His fingers were steady because he demanded it of them. Adults talk in ugly ways sometimes. Noah studied his face with the grave suspicion of someone learning to measure lies by breath. "Are you leaving?" The question came so quickly that Elias's hand stopped. In the doorway, unseen by Noah, Adrian had arrived and remained just beyond the frame. Elias knew he was there from the change in the air, from the child's gaze flicking once toward shadow, from his own body's traitorous awareness. "No," Elias said, and felt the lie enter him like a needle. "Finish your porridge." Noah obeyed because he wanted to believe him. That was the cruelty. All day, the house rearranged itself around the accusation. Guards stood where none had stood before. Servants avoided Elias's eyes and watched once he passed. Marian came in the afternoon with a basket of fruit, and grief folded neatly into her expression. She did not mention the envelope. Her gaze rested on Elias with just enough pity to remind him pity could be sharpened. "How is our Noah today?" she asked. "He slept badly," Elias replied. "Poor child. After everything, he must be protected from further instability." Marian selected an orange from the basket. Children attach themselves easily when frightened, sometimes to warmth, sometimes to danger. It is difficult to know the difference until damage has been done. Elias met her eyes. For 1 second, her smile forgot to be gentle. Adrian entered before either could speak again. Marian's warmth returned at once. "I was just checking on Noah. He's resting," Adrian said. "You can leave the fruit." The dismissal was mild. Marian accepted it as if it had been an invitation. On her way out, she touched Adrian's arm with familial tenderness. "Do not let guilt cloud judgment. Your brother trusted you with his son." After she left, the room retained her perfume like a warning. Adrian looked at Elias. "I will review the source of the evidence." "That means you still consider it evidence." "It means I consider Noah's safety before my personal feelings." "Your personal feelings are not the ones being weighed for disposal." Something moved across Adrian's face pain. Perhaps. Or anger with nowhere to go. "You think I want this. I think wanting has never stopped men like you from doing harm properly." Noah stirred in the bedroom beyond the open door. Both fell silent at once. That was their truest intimacy so far, not desire, not confession, but the shared discipline of refusing to frighten the child. By evening, Elias made his decision. He waited until Noah slept after a story about a stray bird who refused to live in a golden cage. The child's fingers curled loosely around the old scrap of coat. Elias watched him longer than necessary, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the faint crease between his brows, the way safety returned to his breathing only when someone stayed. "I'm sorry," Elias whispered. Noah did not wake. In his room, Elias packed nothing because almost nothing belonged to him. He left the borrowed clothes folded on the chair. He kept only the coat he had worn beneath the bridge, the pendant rubbing cold against his chest, and copied notes hidden inside his shirt. On the desk, he placed what he had gathered from Northline's archives, procurement timestamps, access inconsistencies, staff rosters, the repeated appearance of a dead employee named Caleb Rusk, and a map of possible links between his old case and Noah's abduction. He did not write a farewell. Farewells asked to be answered. The corridor was quiet. The guard outside Noah's room had stepped away at the exact wrong moment, which told Elias Marian's hand still moved inside the house. He passed the study and stopped only once. Light showed beneath the door. Adrian was awake. Elias almost knocked. The impulse frightened him more than the forged evidence had. He had survived by leaving before longing grew roots. To ask Adrian to believe him would be another form of kneeling. He had done enough of that in rooms where no one looked down. He walked out through the service entrance before dawn. Rain met him like an old acquaintance. When Noah woke, The scream tore through the mansion. Adrian reached the room first. The bed was empty of Elias and full of everything Noah could not understand. The child stood barefoot on the floor, clutching the scrap of coat, his face stripped of color. "He promised," Noah said. Adrian stopped in front of him. "Noah, he promised not tonight." The words were not loud. They destroyed the room anyway. Adrian crouched, but Noah backed away from him, shaking his head. "Doctor." Mercer arrived. Then the nurse. Then guards at the door. Too many bodies. Too much sound. Noah folded into himself beside the bed, both hands over his ears, repeating Elias's name until it became less a call than proof of injury. Adrian ordered everyone out. Noah would not let him touch him. After an hour, when the child had exhausted himself into a stunned, silent state, Adrian found the papers in Elias's room. The folded clothes came first. That quiet repayment of borrowed things, then the notes, arranged not dramatically but carefully. With Elias's precise hand-marking contradictions, no desperate kidnapper would have bothered to trace. Adrian stood over the desk while morning brightened the window and read the history of a man who had been framed once and had still spent his borrowed safety trying to keep Noah from being framed by blood. At the bottom of the last page was a name circled 3 times. Caleb Rusk. Adrian knew the name only as one of the dead from Northline's old restructuring period. An accounts manager reported to have taken his own life after an audit discrepancy. A convenient tragedy. Filed and closed before Adrian inherited full control of the subsidiary. His phone rang. The private investigator he had assigned overnight spoke without greeting. "Mr. Val." The account receiving transfers under Wen's name traces back to Caleb Rusk's credentials. But Rusk died 3 years ago. Adrian's gaze moved to the final line in Elias's notes. "Ask who kept using a dead man." The investigator continued, voice tightening. "There is one more thing. Before his death, Rusk reported directly to Marion Vale's office." Adrian closed his eyes. For one breath, the city's most powerful alpha looked less like a man betrayed than a man who had arrived too late at the same door twice. When he opened them, his voice was calm enough to frighten every person listening. "Find Elias before they do." By the time Elias reached South Meridian Bridge, his hands were shaking too badly to keep the pendant hidden. Dawn had not fully broken. The city still wore the color of wet ash, and the river beneath the bridge carried last night's rain in swollen, dirty currents. Elias stood under the concrete arch with his coat pulled tight around him, breathing through the fever that had returned as soon as the mansion's warmth disappeared. Noah was not here. Of course Noah was not here. Noah was in a clean bed under Adrian Vale's roof, with doctors, guards, and an uncle powerful enough to make the city kneel if the child needed silence. Elias had done the useful thing. He had removed the stain before it spread. Still, the bridge felt wrong without the small weight against his side. He crouched beside the pillar where they had spent that first night. Mud had dried in uneven ridges. The cardboard shelter had collapsed in the wind. Elias slid the pendant from beneath his shirt and held it in his palm. The engraved letters had warmed against his skin, as if refusing to belong entirely to blood or wealth anymore. "Don't become sentimental," he whispered. A shoe scraped concrete behind him. Elias closed his fist around the pendant and turned. There were 3 men beneath the bridge. They wore ordinary coats, ordinary shoes, ordinary faces trained to disappear in crowds. That made them more frightening than Vale's guards. One carried a folded umbrella, though it was not raining yet. Another held a brown envelope. The third smiled with the exhausted politeness of a man doing unpleasant work for a respectable employer. "Mr. Venn," the smiling man said, "you're difficult to invite properly." Elias rose slowly. "I'm not accepting invitations. That is unfortunate. Madam Vale hoped you would show more concern for the child. Marian's name was not spoken, but her perfume seemed to enter the damp air anyway. Elias glanced toward the slope leading up to the road. Empty. Too empty. The bridge that once ignored him had now been arranged. "She sent you to kill me?" Elias asked. Nothing so dramatic. The man with the envelope stepped closer. "Drama creates witnesses. Madam only wants correction." He opened the envelope and took out several pages. Elias saw his own name, a confession already typed, dense with legal phrasing, admission of involvement, coercion by outside parties, financial desperation, apology to the Vale family. The lie was elegant. It even allowed him remorse, as if dignity could be forged alongside guilt. "Sign it." The man said, "Then you will leave the city. There will be money." "And if I refuse?" The smile thinned. Then the child's recovery becomes complicated. Children can be reminded of things. They can be questioned until memory breaks in the right direction. Elias moved before thought could catch him. He drove his shoulder into the man nearest the slope and ran. Pain exploded through his ankle at the first step, but fear carried him farther than strength. The river flashed to his left. The maintenance path blurred beneath him. For one wild second, he thought he might reach the stairs. The umbrella struck the back of his knees. He went down hard, palms tearing against gravel. The pendant flew from his hand and skidded into a shallow puddle. Elias lunged for it, but a shoe pressed between his shoulder blades, pinning him to the ground. "Don't make this ugly," someone said. Elias tasted blood where his teeth had cut his lip. Above the bridge, traffic continued as if the city had not learned anything about cruelty since the first night he slept under it. He watched the pendant glimmer in the puddle. Noah's name and Adrian's family mark shining through muddy water. For the first time since leaving the mansion, Elias was afraid he had been wrong. Not about Marian, not about the evidence, about leaving. Across the city, Adrian Vale had not slept. By sunrise, his study had become a war room. Investigators moved in and out with silent urgency. Caleb Rusk's dead credentials led to archived payment channels. Those channels led to shell vendors approved during Marian's restructuring committee. The shell vendors led to a private security contractor dissolved 2 weeks after Noah disappeared. Every fact Adrian uncovered felt less like discovery than indictment. On the desk before him lay Elias's notes, written in a hand so controlled Adrian could see the effort behind each line. "Ask who benefits if the child is damaged enough to be ruled through." Adrian read that sentence 3 times. His phone vibrated. South Meridian. His investigator said, "Traffic camera caught Wen near the bridge." 3 unidentified men entered 5 minutes after him. One vehicle registered to a Vale Charitable Foundation is parked nearby under a temporary plate. For a moment, Adrian's hand went still on the phone. Then everything in him became quiet. "Send the Rusk file to the police and regulators." He said, "Not through my office. Directly." "Mr. Vale. That implicates family leadership. It implicates criminals. And Madam Vale." Adrian looked at the photograph of Noah taken before the kidnapping. A child, standing stiffly beside his late father, already learning restraint from adults who mistook it for strength. "Bring her to South Meridian. Tell her there is a board emergency. Let her arrive thinking she still controls the room." When Elias was forced to his knees beside the service road, rain finally began. It fell lightly at first, softening the dust on his hands. One man held his arms behind his back. Another pressed a pen between his fingers. The confession blurred beneath raindrops, the ink running at the edges before he could sign. "Write your name." The smiling man said. Elias lifted his head. "You people always need the victim's handwriting to feel honest." The man seed. You were chosen because you were convenient. Do not start imagining importance now. That struck less deeply than it was meant to. Elias had spent years believing convenience was the closest the world came to acknowledging him. Then a feverish child had called him home. Then a cold alpha had stopped at a raised hand because Noah feared sudden movement. Importance, Elias thought, was not something powerful people granted. Sometimes it was a small hand refusing to let go. He spat blood onto the paper. The blow came from the side. White light broke across his vision. He would have fallen if the man behind him had not held him upright. The pen slipped from his fingers. Engines sounded on the road. Not one, several. The men turned. Black cars descended the maintenance path, followed by 2 police vehicles and a van from a financial news network. Reporters spilled out uncertainly, drawn by the smell of scandal before they understood its shape. Security formed a perimeter. At the center of it all, Adrian Vale stepped into the rain without an umbrella. Marion emerged from another car seconds later. Her cream coat protected by an aide holding a black umbrella. Even here, beneath the bridge, she looked composed enough to host condolences. Adrian, she said sharply, what is this? Adrian did not look at her first. He looked at Elias. That was the first undoing. The men holding Elias released him at once. But Elias stayed on his knees because his body had forgotten the next instruction. Adrian crossed the distance with measured steps. The same terrifying calm from the morning they met. Only this time, it did not point at Elias. It moved around him like a wall. Dr. Mercer, Adrian said. The doctor rushed forward from the second car and knelt beside Elias. Elias tried to pull away on instinct, but Adrian crouched before him, lowering himself into the rain-soaked mud without hesitation. Expensive fabric darkened at once. The image sent a murmur through the watching crowd. Elias, Adrian said. His name. Not the Omega. Not the witness. Not the suspect. Elias's vision blurred. Whether from rain or pain, he could not tell. You're late. I know. No excuse. No defense polished for public use. Adrian removed his coat and wrapped it around Elias's shoulders. The same gesture he had once offered Noah. Elias's hands curled weakly into the fabric before he could stop them. Marion's voice cut through the rain. This is absurd. That man is involved in Noah's disappearance. Adrian, step away before you compromise. Adrian rose. When he turned, the crowd seemed to step back, though no one moved. Marion Vale, you are being investigated for conspiracy, financial fraud, obstruction of evidence, and involvement in the abduction of Noah Vale. A flash went off, then another. Marion's face did not change immediately. Her control was old and well-trained. You are grieving. You are making a spectacle because an Omega manipulated your guilt. Adrian lifted one hand. His chief counsel opened a tablet and released the files already sent to police transfers through Caleb Rusk's credentials. Security contracts, modified bridge footage, Northline files, internal signatures, and the purchase order for Noah's pendant routed through Marion's office. This is not grief. Adrian said, this is evidence. Marion looked at the police, then at the reporters, then finally at Elias. In that moment, her elegance thinned enough for the hatred beneath to show. It was not wild or cartoonish. It was colder than that. She had built her life around proximity to power and could not forgive a discarded Omega for becoming the point where her structure cracked. You think he will keep you, she said to Elias. Men like him protect what belongs to them. Once you are no longer useful, you will learn the difference. Elias had no strength to answer. Adrian did. He does not belong to me. The words were quiet. They traveled farther than thunder. Noah's cry came from behind the police line. Elias turned so quickly, pain tore through his side. Noah had escaped Dr. Mercer's assistant and was running through the rain in slippers. Adrian's guard close behind, but afraid to grab him. The child flung himself at Elias, nearly knocking him backward. "You left." Noah sobbed into his chest. "You left again." Elias wrapped one arm around him and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." "Don't go." "I'm sorry." It was the only truth he could hold without breaking. Adrian knelt beside them. Rain ran down his face, stripping away every trace of distance. He did not touch either of them at first. He only stayed close enough to be chosen or refused. "Can you still trust me once?" he asked Elias. The question was too small for the damage between them and somehow large enough to contain it. Elias looked at him, at the mud on his knees, at the coat over his own shoulders, at Noah shaking between them. He had no strength left for forgiveness. Trust was impossible. Trust was also sometimes a hand extended before one understood whether the ground would hold. Elias did not answer. He let Adrian lift him from the mud. When he woke, the ceiling was familiar. Not the bridge, not the medical room. His room in the Vale residence, lit by afternoon rain through clean curtains. Elias lay beneath warm blankets with his palm bandaged, his ankle wrapped, and Noah asleep in a chair beside the bed. One small hand tucked around the edge of the sheet. The door was open. Beyond it, Adrian sat in the corridor instead of entering. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair still damp, his posture too straight for exhaustion to hide inside it. He looked as if he had been waiting there for hours, guarding a threshold he no longer believed he had the right to cross. Elias watched him through the open door. Adrian looked up. Neither spoke. For the first time, the silence did not feel like a locked room. When Elias was well enough to stand, Adrian placed a key on the table and stepped back. It was early morning, 3 days after South Meridian Bridge, and the city had finally run out of rain. Thin sunlight entered the recovery room through clean curtains, falling across the brass key as if it were something fragile rather than ordinary. Noah slept in the adjoining room with the door open. Downstairs, attorneys waited with statements, police reports, and enough evidence to drag 3 years of buried rot into daylight. Adrian did not sit. "The apartment is not owned by Vale Group." Adrian said, "The lease is in your name. 6 months have been paid. There is no staff, no security detail unless you request one, and no obligation to tell me where you go after that." Elias looked at the key for a long time. "You prepared an exit. I prepared a choice." The difference should have sounded convenient. It did not. Adrian's voice carried no expectation of gratitude. He stood at the far side of the table, leaving more distance than the room required, as though proximity itself had become something he must earn again. Elias remembered the door without a lock, the envelope, the mud. He also remembered Adrian kneeling in the rain, asking for trust. "You said rooms here had no locks," Adrian added. That was true. It should not have been. Elias's fingers touched the key but did not close around it. Beyond the open door, Noah murmured in sleep and settled again. The child's recovery had begun in uneven pieces. Sometimes he woke screaming. Sometimes he accepted Adrian's hand before Elias's. Sometimes he watched every adult who left a room until they returned, counting absence like a language he did not yet trust. "If I take it," Elias said, "Noah will think I'm leaving. If you don't take it because of Noah, he will learn that love is another cage." The words surprised them both. Adrian lowered his gaze first. He had not been a gentle man. He was learning gentleness with the embarrassment of someone using an injured hand. Elias saw the effort, and because he saw it, he had to look away. Marion Vale was arrested on a Thursday without rain. She did not struggle. That would have been too honest. She walked through the Vale residence lobby in a pale suit, one wrist enclosed by a discreet restraint, her face composed for the cameras she had spent a lifetime understanding. Reporters shouted questions. Marian answered none. Her silence was not dignity. It was calculation continuing after defeat. As police escorted her past, she stopped before Adrian. "You have made the family bleed in public." Adrian's expression remained unreadable. The family was already bleeding. You only taught it to smile. Her gaze shifted to Elias, who stood beside Dr. Mercer with Noah pressed against his leg. For the first time, Marian did not soften her contempt. "And you," she said, "do not mistake rescue for belonging. Men like him tire of guilt." Elias felt Noah's small hand tighten around his sleeve. Once, those words might have found the old wound and made a home there. Now they only passed over scar tissue. He looked at Marian calmly. "Then it's fortunate I no longer survive by being kept." Something cold flashed in Marian's eyes. Then she was gone, swallowed by camera flashes and the formal machinery of consequences. It did not heal anyone. Justice could open a window, but it did not carry the body out by itself. The public apology came 2 weeks later. Adrian insisted on standing before the press himself instead of sending counsel. The statement was clean, factual, and devastating. Northline Biomed's internal report against Elias Wen had been falsified. Financial records had been manipulated. An innocent employee had been blacklisted under Vale authority. Adrian did not call it an unfortunate oversight or procedural failure. He said, in front of cameras, Vale Group harmed him. Elias watched from a side room, not from the stage. He had refused to stand beside Adrian like proof of mercy. He had refused the executive assistant position offered by the board as symbolic restoration. The title belonged to the life stolen from him. He did not want it returned like a repaired coat that no longer fit. After the press conference, Adrian found him in the corridor. "They'll ask what you want instead." "I know. What will you tell them?" Elias looked through the glass wall toward the reporters packing equipment beneath white lights. "There are children under bridges. Omegan in shelters. Employees framed because they have no surname worth fearing. I want a place for people before they become convenient victims." Adrian understood at once. He always did. When he allowed himself to listen, a foundation, not a veil ornament. No. He paused. "Independent trustees. Public accounting. Your authority final." Elias smiled faintly. "You prepared that answer too quickly." "I prepared several. Most were worse." It was the closest Adrian came to humor, and because he seemed faintly ashamed of it, Elias allowed himself to laugh. The sound was small, unused, but it changed the corridor. Adrian looked at him as if something long withheld had entered the world, and he did not dare move too quickly near it. The first week, Elias slept at the apartment. Noah refused dinner. He sat at the long dining table with both hands in his lap, face pale with betrayal. Elias had warned him all afternoon. He had shown him the address, the phone, the small blue toothbrush waiting in the apartment bathroom for nights when Noah visited. None of it mattered when evening came, and Elias put on his coat. "You said you come back," Noah whispered. "I will." "When?" "Tomorrow morning." "That is too long." Adrian, seated across from him, did not interfere. That was new. In the past, he might have ordered comfort into place, hired experts, controlled the damage. Now he let pain exist without trying to dominate it. Elias knelt beside Noah's chair. "Do you remember the bird story?" Elias asked. "The one with the golden cage?" Noah nodded without looking at him. "If the bird stays only because the door is shut, it isn't home. It becomes home when the door is open and the bird still returns." Noah's lips trembled. What if it doesn't? Elias had no answer that would not be a lie. So he gave the harder truth gently. Then we grieve. But I am not leaving because I want to disappear. I am going so I can come back properly. Noah stared at him for a long time, then held out the scrap of old coat. Elias thought the child wanted him to take it. Instead, Noah pressed it into his palm, solemn and shaking. So you remember. Elias closed his fingers around the cloth. Adrian turned his face toward the window, but not before Elias saw his eyes darken. The foundation opened in late autumn. It began not with a gala, but with a converted community clinic near the Eastern District, where the paint still smelled new and the waiting room chairs did not match. Elias chose the building because it stood near 3 bus lines and no marble stairs. The sign outside read Harbour House. Noah had chosen the name after declaring that bridges were where people waited, but harbours were where they arrived. Adrian attended the opening from the back of the crowd. He wore an ordinary dark coat and allowed other people to stand in front of him. Reporters noticed anyway, but he did not speak. He watched Elias cut the ribbon with Dr. Ribbon, Mercer, a Labour advocate, and Caleb Rusk's sister, who had wept when the investigation cleared her brother's name. In that moment, the story widened beyond 2 wounded men and a child. The dead were given back their names. The living were given somewhere to begin again. Afterward, Elias found Adrian in the courtyard, standing beneath a tree that had dropped yellow leaves over his shoes. You stayed in the back. It wasn't my day. It was partly your money. Money is loud enough without me adding to it. Elias looked at him then. Really looked. Adrian Vale had not become soft. Perhaps he never would. His edges remained. His silences. His instinct to control before asking for help. But he had learned to stop at thresholds. He had learned to wait in corridors. He had learned that protection without choice was only possession wearing cleaner clothes. You've changed, Elias said. Adrian's mouth moved slightly. Not enough. No, Elias agreed, but enough to keep changing. Winter arrived without ceremony. Noah learned to sleep with the door half closed, then closed. Then, one miraculous night. He forgot to ask whether Elias would be there in the morning. Adrian stood outside the child's room after discovering this, his hand on the knob, looking almost wounded by hope. Elias, who had come by after a late meeting at Harbour House, stood beside him and said nothing. Inside, Noah slept deeply, one arm thrown over the pillow, the old scrap of coat on the bedside table instead of in his fist. He is healing, Adrian said. So are you. The words slipped out before Elias chose them. Adrian turned his head. The corridor was dim, lit only by the small lamp near the stairs. For once, there were no witnesses, no reporters, no child between them demanding courage. Only 2 men who had hurt each other in ways neither could erase and had stayed long enough for apology to become behavior. Adrian's voice was low. I want to ask you to stay. Elias's pulse moved once. Hard, but I won't ask it like that. Adrian continued. Not as repayment. Not because Noah needs you. Not because I do. Elias looked at his hand resting near the banister. Adrian did not reach first. That restraint, more than any confession, undid him. Then ask me something else, Elias said. Adrian's breath changed. Where do you want to go? Elias took his hand. It was not dramatic. No thunder. No urgent embrace. No vow large enough to frighten the future. His fingers slid into Adrian's, and Adrian held them as if permitted warmth could still be sacred. Home, Elias said. In spring, they returned to South Meridian Bridge. Noah insisted on carrying the flowers himself. He was taller now, cheeks fuller, his dark hair combed badly because Adrian had tried to help, and Elias had refused to fix it on principle. Rain fell lightly, not the cruel storm of that first night, but a clean drizzle that made the river smell alive. The cardboard was gone. The mud had dried. The city had repaired part of the drainage path without ever knowing it had once held the heir of its most powerful family and the Omega, who refused to leave him behind. Noah placed the flowers beside the pillar with solemn care. "For the night we met," he said. Elias crouched beside him. "That was a hard night." Noah nodded. "But you found me." Adrian stood behind them, quiet beneath the rain. After a while, he asked, "Do you regret it?" Elias looked at the bridge, then at Noah, then at Adrian's hand, waiting without demand at his side. Once, life had chosen him only as an easy person to discard. Under this bridge, in mud and fever, something had changed without asking permission. "No," Elias said, "I think that was the first time life chose me back." Noah took one of his hands. Adrian took the other only after Elias reached for him. Together, they climbed the slope toward the waiting car, leaving the bridge behind, but not erasing it. Some places remained inside the body forever, not as wounds, if one was fortunate, but as weathered thresholds. The rain followed them home,